Welcome back to the dark side of the internet. Tonight, we dive into 3 disturbing stories, tales of lost control, voices that shouldn't exist, and hours that disappear into nothingness. Turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and remember, some stories don't just stay on the screen, they follow you into the night.
Story 1. Pacemaker. Demonic blood in wake. It started when I was 16. I was an only child, living with my mother and father. Every night I would wake up at 2:16 a.m. exactly. No dopiness, no tiredness, nothing. I would sit bolt upright for a reason unknown to me, and I would listen. I would see nothing in the pitch black of my room. I would hear nothing in my silent house. For 5 minutes until 2:21 a.m., I would listen hard. At first, I heard generally 5 minutes of being totally alert, totally unable to switch off, hearing not a single sound. Then, as quickly as the alertness came, it faded and I'd fall fast asleep. This went on for a few weeks, every night the same. I didn't think much of it. I wasn't scared very easily. This was more puzzling than anything else. Around a month or so into the awakenings, I heard the first sound. It was so close to being inaudible, I almost thought I imagined it. A soft footfall outside my door, on the stairs leading up to my attic room. The next night, another step taken, yet still incredibly quiet, as if on tiptoes. Still, I was more puzzled than scared, but it was starting to become a little strange. This progressed night after night, the footsteps growing louder and louder, closer and closer up the 12 stairs to my room. On the 5th night, I tried to get out of my bed to investigate during the awakening, but I couldn't move. It didn't feel like paralysis. It felt like my body wasn't my own, as if I had no control, as if all I had was consciousness and no physical input. I started to become scared. The next day, I stayed off school, sick. I was beside myself with fear for that night. I finally fell asleep at around 2 a.m. And I woke up the next day like nothing had ever happened. I had not awakened during my sleep. I felt more refreshed than I had been in weeks. I was beside myself with relief and had a great day. The next night, again, I slept like a log. It was over. The next month was probably the best of my life. I did well in all my classes, I got a girlfriend, I had good luck, and generally just had a good time. It was after a particularly good Saturday spent with my girlfriend that I went to bed, the happiest guy alive. I couldn't wait for the next day. I have never felt the same chills as I felt that night when I woke up at 2:16 a.m., sitting bolt upright, unable to move, staring blindly into space. Listening. 4 minutes of complete silence passed. With every second, a stronger chill surged down my spine. With every second, another bead of cold sweat slipping down my neck. At 2:20, with the loudest crash, I heard my door being ripped from its hinges and smashed against the far wall. Footsteps thudding towards me with unstoppable intent, louder than you can possibly imagine, closer and closer until they stopped dead. A cold rush of air washed over me, chilling me to the bone. My eyes wide with terror, searching for anything to focus on. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then suddenly, emblazoned in my vision in white etched print, the words, "I have arrived," along with the most horrible sound I have ever heard. If you have ever heard the screams of foxes in the night, imagine them at a much lower pitch, an inhuman, guttural scream, the scream of an agonized, tortured soul. I remember the exact sound to this very day. Beyond that, there was nothing. I fell asleep at 2:21 a.m. and woke up the next day too terrified to do anything. I sat hunched on my bed all day, unmoving. When night came, I was wide awake. I never wanted to sleep again. Time ticked by on the clock, 1:30, 1:45, 2 o'clock, 2:10, then I blacked out. I don't remember anything that happened that night. I awoke to find myself standing in my parents' room, simply standing there, arms by my sides, relaxed. I had no idea how I got there, which in itself was slightly alarming, as I had never been prone to sleepwalking. But the disturbing thing was that I didn't feel odd. I didn't feel out of place, staring blankly down at the faces of my sleeping parents. I couldn't help but notice how vulnerable they looked. Eventually, I snapped out of my trance and went downstairs. I vaguely remember making breakfast. I ate food but tasted nothing. My senses seemed to be dulled, my head hazy. Despite the horror of the night before last, I did not feel scared. I didn't feel, well, anything. I went to school that day, concentrating on nothing, accepting a detention wordlessly, coasting along, never once making an attempt to talk to anyone about anything. School ended, and I walked home. That night, my phone rang. I watched it. I remember just watching it ring out. No desire to answer, no desire to even check who it was. Presumably, it was my girlfriend, as she came round later that night. I was upstairs, just sitting on my bed, staring at the wall. She tried to talk to me. I didn't answer. She lay down and pulled me down with her. She hugged me, trying to coerce me to respond. But one thing really annoyed me, and I don't know why. She kept telling me I was really cold, really fucking cold. Eventually, I turned over to look at her. At first, she smiled as my eyes met hers. Finally, a response. The smile quickly faded. I felt no love for this girl. I felt like I did not know her, and this must have been reflected in my eyes. Empty, devoid of caring. All I could see was her vulnerability lying there next to me. She fell asleep at about 1 a.m. I just watched her like that for a full hour. At 2 a.m., I closed my eyes, not even a hint of anxiety. I counted those 16 minutes, second by second, and thereafter, I remember nothing. I awoke to find myself in a pool of blood as dawn broke. I looked to my right to see my girlfriend. Her chest was ripped apart, her ribs hanging loose at either side, unidentifiable organs spilling out. I felt nothing. I rose from my bed, covered in blood. I followed a trail of red, arterial blood out of my room, down my stairs, into my parents' room. My father's head lay bloodied and caved in beside his still oozing neck. A giant gash split his back in two. His right leg rammed down my mother's throat, her jaw unhinged, and her legs and arms crumpled at impossible angles. I felt nothing. I turned around and walked downstairs. I noticed a trail of blood left in my wake. You could smell it seeping into the carpet, the cloying smell of iron pervading the house, even through my numbed senses. I went and made myself breakfast, another tasteless meal. In fact, it was getting worse. I could taste less than the day before. I went back upstairs and stared at the wall for hours, I think. By now, I keep forgetting what happened. My mind just became cloudy and unaware of what was happening. Eventually, I just lay back down in the pool of blood next to my eviscerated girlfriend. I remember reading 2:16 on the alarm before I went to sleep that night. I remember waking up standing in front of the wall next to my parents' room. From the door frame to where I was standing at the wall, neat rows of blood-colored handprints. I couldn't see much, but looking down, I saw my hand smeared in red. My hearing was almost gone. My touch was so dull that I felt completely separate from the rest of the world. Trudging over to my parents' room, I should have been horrified, not only because of the mangled corpses, but because of the fact that every wall, the floor, and even the ceiling were covered in handprints. My handprints, inked in my parents' coagulating blood. The last thing I remember doing was going downstairs and clumsily searching through my drawers, finally finding a rusty old knife that dropped behind the back of one drawer, then making my slow way upstairs. Then, nothing. A neighbor eventually complained about the smell coming from our house. The police arrived shortly afterwards. I pity anyone who had to step into that house. Nearly a week's decay would have made the smell utterly overwhelming. They thought we were all dead at first, but when they had been transported outside, upon closer inspection, I was still alive, somehow. They had found me on the stairs, with both legs and my left arm lying beside me, detached. There were no clean cuts, nothing surgical about the procedure. They could not explain how I had not died of shock or blood loss, but as they discovered my only remaining limb grasping that blunt, rusty table knife, they knew what had done it. I've been in the institution for 2 weeks now. I feel never better. I feel normal. I'm like any other person now. Any one of you. I could be living a normal life, feeling like this, like every one of your existences. But I'm not. I'm writing this final little bit, waiting for an operation to save my digestive system. See, there's an unidentified metal object in there somewhere that has to come out, a little box-shaped thing. Well, I say unidentified. I only just remembered that my girlfriend had a pacemaker.
Story 2. Voices in the Static. Aiden was always drawn to strange, forgotten things, the kind of person who scoured flea markets for broken gadgets and dusty relics. He had a fascination with old technology. One Saturday afternoon, he found a weathered radio tucked away at a local yard sale, its wooden case cracked and its dials tarnished from years of neglect. It looked decades old, a relic of a different time. When he asked the seller about it, the old man hesitated. "You sure you want this one?" he asked, squinting at Aiden. "It's no ordinary radio." Aiden shrugged it off, chalking the warning up to some sales tactic. "I'll take it," he replied, thinking about how cool it would look in his dorm room. But he couldn't shake the feeling that the man's gaze lingered on him a moment too long as he walked away. Back in his dorm, Aiden spent hours tinkering with the radio, cleaning its insides and fixing the cracked speaker. When he finally turned it on, all he got was a steady hum of static. He twisted the dial, searching for any recognizable stations, but found nothing. Eventually, he gave up for the night, leaving it in the corner of his room. Then, around midnight, the radio turned on by itself. Aiden jolted awake to the soft hum, his eyes adjusting to the dim glow of the dials. He sat up, watching the radio warily. Through the crackling static, he heard faint voices, soft, almost like whispers. At first, he thought it was just interference, or maybe some distant station he'd accidentally tuned into. But as he listened closer, the voices became clearer. They were telling a story. The voice was low and gravelly, recounting a tale of a man who disappeared while walking home late one night. The details were eerie, like something out of a horror novel. Aiden was transfixed, hanging on every word. The story ended abruptly, and the static returned. The next night, at exactly the same time, the radio came on again. This time, it was a woman's voice. She spoke of a young girl who went missing from her small town, last seen near the woods by her house. Aiden shivered. The story felt real, as if he were listening to someone confess their deepest, darkest secrets. Every night, the voices returned at midnight, each one telling a new story. Stories of people who had disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances. Each voice was different, some whispering, others sobbing, but all of them shared the same haunted tone, as if they were trapped in the static. After a few days, Aiden noticed the stories were starting to change. They weren't random anymore. They were becoming personal. A tale about a car crash mentioned the street where his best friend lived. Another story about a drowning took place near the lake where he'd spent his summer vacation. And then, one night, a voice described an incident at a local diner where he and his friends often hung out. The voice went on to describe an argument that had taken place there, a confrontation he remembered word for word. Panicked, he tried to shut the radio off. He unplugged it, but the static didn't stop. Even with the power cut, the dials still glowed faintly, and the whispers continued, as if the voices had found a way to linger in his room. He tossed a blanket over the radio, but it was no use. The voices seeped through, relentless and eerie. The next day, Aiden noticed dark circles under his eyes and a growing sense of paranoia. He started keeping a distance from his friends, afraid that the radio's predictions would come true. He barely ate, barely slept,
waiting every night for the voices to return. One night, the whispers changed. Instead of recounting tales of strangers, the voice spoke directly to him. "Aiden," it whispered, his name slicing through the static. The voice was deep and raspy, sending chills down his spine. It described his room, the objects on his desk, even the clothes he was wearing. He glanced around, heart pounding, half expecting to see someone there with him. The voice continued, detailing things he'd done that very day, conversations he'd had, thoughts he'd barely acknowledged himself. It spoke of his childhood memories, his fears, things he'd never told anyone. The voice shifted, taking on a familiar tone, one that made his skin crawl. It was his grandfather's voice, a man who had died years ago. "See you soon," it whispered, before fading back into static. Terrified, Aiden unplugged the radio and shoved it in his closet, hoping to bury the voices in silence. But the next night, the static returned, louder this time, filling the room with a shrill, ear-piercing hiss that grew into a frenzy of overlapping voices, all crying out at once. They screamed his name, accusing him, pleading with him to listen. Desperate, Aiden grabbed the radio and threw it out his window, shattering it into pieces on the pavement below. The room fell silent, and for the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of relief. But that night, the static returned, faint at first, then growing louder, except now it wasn't coming from the radio. The sound was inside his head, a constant hum that followed him everywhere he went. He couldn't escape it. Every reflective surface seemed to shimmer with faint images of faces, their mouths moving in silent screams, as if trapped behind glass. In his final days, friends noticed Aiden growing more distant, his eyes vacant and haunted. He would sit alone, staring blankly, listening to something only he could hear. His grades plummeted, and he rarely spoke, except to mutter strange warnings about the voices. One morning, Aiden disappeared. His dorm was empty, his belongings untouched, but he was gone. The only clue he left behind was the broken radio, somehow returned to his room, the dials eerily intact and glowing faintly. When the police examined it, they could barely hear the whispers over the static, a low, gravelly voice saying, "See you soon." The radio found a new home in a campus storage room, but late at night, students still swear they hear faint voices coming from the walls, telling stories of those who vanished, one voice adding a new tale each time someone gets too close.
Story 3: The Missing Time. For weeks, Ethan had been waking up feeling strange, with a gnawing sense that something was deeply wrong. It wasn't just fatigue, he was missing time. Every morning, the clock would read 6 a.m., but he felt like he had gone to bed only minutes before. His nights, once filled with normal dreams, had become empty, blank. And no matter how hard he tried to remember, there was a gap, 3 hours each night, completely gone from his memory. At first, he thought it was just stress. His job had been piling on more responsibilities, and he chalked the odd sleep patterns up to overwork. But soon, the missing time became impossible to ignore. He started waking up in different positions than he fell asleep in. On the couch when he was sure he'd gone to bed, shoes kicked off in a corner, or clothes rumpled as though he'd dressed himself in the night and forgotten. Ethan began setting alarms to wake himself at random times in the night, but no matter what he did, he never woke during those missing 3 hours. The alarms would go off, but he wouldn't hear them. It was as if his body and his mind weren't there during that window of time. Disturbed and desperate for answers, Ethan bought a security camera and set it up in his bedroom, aimed directly at his bed. If something was happening, he wanted proof. That night, he went to bed feeling uneasy, the camera's small red light blinking in the corner, silently watching. When he woke up the next morning, he immediately checked the footage. For the first few hours, everything was normal. Ethan tossed and turned a bit, but nothing out of the ordinary. Then, exactly at 3 a.m., something changed. He sat up abruptly, his movements stiff and robotic as if he wasn't fully awake. But the eerie part was his face. It was completely blank, eyes wide open but glazed over as though he wasn't really there. Slowly, mechanically, he got out of bed and walked out of the room. Ethan's heart pounded as he watched the footage. Where was he going? The camera in his bedroom couldn't capture anything beyond the doorway, so he switched to the living room camera. There he was, moving through the darkened apartment with purpose. He walked into the kitchen, opened a drawer, and pulled out a knife. "What the hell?" Ethan whispered to himself, his pulse quickening. On the screen, his body wandered back to the living room, knife in hand. Then he just stood there facing the window, not moving for what felt like hours. At 6 a.m., he dropped the knife onto the floor and calmly walked back to bed. As soon as he lay down, his body seemed to relax and his face softened back into sleep. It was like someone had flipped a switch. Ethan stared at the screen in disbelief. He didn't remember any of it. Over the next few nights, he continued recording, hoping the strange behavior would stop. But every night, the same thing happened. 3 a.m. sharp, he would rise, eyes empty, and move around the apartment in a trance. Sometimes he would stand in front of the mirror for hours, just staring at his reflection. Other times, he would sit at his desk, scribbling nonsense words on pieces of paper, pages filled with strange symbols he didn't recognize. One night, Ethan woke with a start, the sound of his own voice echoing in his ears. He glanced at the clock, 6:03 a.m., but something was different this time. His hands were covered in dirt, his nails caked with mud. He sat up quickly, heart racing. Had he gone outside? His feet were cold, damp, and dirty. He had definitely been out there in the middle of the night during the missing hours. Terrified, he rushed to check the footage. The camera showed him getting out of bed at 3 a.m. as usual, but this time, instead of wandering the house, he had gone outside. He could see himself walking down the street, disappearing into the darkness, his bare feet padding silently on the pavement. He fast-forwarded through the footage, hoping to see where he went, but he didn't return until just before 6 a.m., when he calmly walked back into the apartment covered in mud. But where had he gone? What had he done? Desperate for answers, Ethan searched his body for clues. That's when he found it, an unfamiliar mark on the back of his neck. It was small, like a puncture wound or a tiny incision, still red and tender. Panic set in. Had he done this to himself during one of his trances? Or was someone or something else involved? Ethan's nights became a waking nightmare. He tried chaining himself to the bed, but every morning the chain would be undone as if it had never been locked. No matter what precautions he took, he would still lose those 3 hours, and the footage showed him doing increasingly bizarre and terrifying things, digging holes in the backyard, carving symbols into the walls, even standing over his neighbors' houses, watching them as they slept. One night, Ethan, determined to find out what was happening, he set up more cameras and placed a GPS tracker on himself. The next morning, he checked the tracker first. His stomach dropped when he saw the location history. Between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., he had traveled miles outside of town, to a wooded area he'd never been to before. Ethan raced to the location, dreading what he might find. The trees loomed above him, casting long shadows. The GPS led him deeper into the woods, to a small clearing. There, in the center, was a freshly dug pit. Inside the pit was a small, crude wooden box. Ethan's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside, he found old, brittle pieces of paper covered with the same strange symbols he had been drawing in his sleep. And there, at the bottom of the box, was something that made his blood run cold. A photograph. A picture of him, standing in the exact same spot, taken from years ago, even though he had no memory of ever being there. As he stood there, the sun rising behind him, a chilling realization crept over him. The missing time wasn't just about sleep. It had been happening for far longer than he'd realized, and whatever force had been controlling him, it wasn't done with him yet.
And that's the end of tonight's stories. If any sound plays on its own tonight, or if you wake up missing a few hours, just remember, it's probably nothing. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe for more horror every night. See you in the next story. you.